So one of the biggest questions we hear about, hey, I was arrested for a DUI, but I was only taking my prescribed drug, is is that even legal? And the answer is yes. So under California law, paragraph A of 23152 says that if you're taking a drug that impairs your ability to drive such that you couldn't operate the vehicle with the caution characteristic of a sober person, under the same circumstances, you can be found guilty of DUI, even with a prescription drug. Now, I know what you're thinking, but my doctor prescribed it. My doctor didn't tell me I couldn't drive the car. Even the bottle doesn't say that. Although some drugs say on it, use caution when operating a motor vehicle or caution operating heavy equipment. In fact, what it should say is don't drive the darn car under these prescription drugs. Even though it's lawful for you to possess them, even though it's lawful for you to take them, the bottom line is with certain types of prescription drugs, you can be impaired and be drunk driving, even though it's not drunk, it's drugs instead of alcohol. So when we look at drug DUI, especially prescription drug DUI, technically the penalties can be the same for first, second, or third time DUI. But because it's a prescribed drug, if we make the right approach to the judge and to the DA's office, oftentimes we can mitigate or reduce the sanctions. We can reduce potential jail time. We can reduce alcohol school time. We can reduce a lot of things with a drug DUI that might not be as easy to do with an alcohol DUI. The key fact is this. Number one, we're taking a prescribed drug. Number two, if they took a blood sample and that's how they know how much of the substance was in your body, we do detailed research on what a prescribed drug, how long it should last in your system, how long the quote half-life is, and what level of prescribed drug is likely to cause impairment. Because drug DUIs are rare, prescription drug DUIs are rare, there aren't a lot of actual studies out there to rely upon. And because of that, the few studies that are out there, we can use to your advantage to help reduce the penalties as best as possible and sometimes even win the case outright. With DUIs involving prescription drugs and even unlawful drugs, there are different tests that they ask you to perform than the standard DUI tests. They have you walk the line, they have you raise your foot, they have you lean back and estimate 30 seconds. That estimation of 30 seconds is called the Romberg test or the modified Romberg test. Fancy word for close your eyes, lean back, and count to 30 in your mind and tell us when you're done. What you're doing is putting your feet together, you're putting your hands at your side, which is an unnatural position all by itself. And then they're looking for whether or not you sway. With a drug DUI case, that could be there even if you're safe to drive. With every other test that they administer, they're looking for increases in pulse rate, decreases in pulse rate, things like that. The number one way that they prove DUI driving for prescription drugs is frankly because you crashed your car. If you had so much prescription drug in your system you crashed, that's probably the most likely way they can convict you of the charge. Again, because the prescribed drug, we have that issue that it was a lawful drug for you to take to try and mitigate the outcome of your case and lower the penalties as best as possible. So when they're testing you for prescribed drug use in a DUI case, there's two methods they can test. Usually they'll take a blood test. They'll take you to a local hospital in West County, Ventura. It's VCMC, Ventura County Medical Center. East County is Los Robles, or sometimes they take you to Simi Adventist if you're out there in Simi Valley. The blood test is done by a registered nurse and has to be done with in a prescribed method. You also have to have an anticoagulant in the vial, and that has to be properly mixed. We check to make sure that was done right, because if it wasn't done right, that will affect the reliability of the sample. On a much smaller basis, they take a urine sample. Urine samples are less reliable because what a urine sample shows us is what level of drug you had in your system since the last time you used the restroom. So if you used the restroom at noon and they took the urine sample at 6 p.m., they're not telling us what your level of substance was at the time of the driving. What they're actually measuring is the level of the substance between noon and 6 p.m., which is not nearly as reliable. And because of those factors, California really disfavors the use of urine tests in drug DUI cases. So when we're looking at the difference between a drug DUI, prescribed or otherwise, and an alcohol DUI, for the most part, they are the same, except a prescribed drug usually will lead to a lower penalty than an illegal drug like heroin or oxycodone that you're taking without a prescription. Versus alcohol. There's also a lesser effect on your driver's license. Typically, your driver's license will be affected for about half of the amount of time that will be affected for an alcohol DUI. The exception is one of the tricky things that CHP or other law enforcement agencies will do is instead of going after your license for drunk driving or for driving while impaired by a drug, they will try and take it for a medical reason. It's called a medical suspension. We fight those cases, and frankly, we're almost universally 100% successful at getting your license back when they do that. But it is a trick that they use to try and take your license when prescription drugs or occasionally non-prescribed drugs like heroin or methamphetamine are involved. So if you've been arrested for a DUI involving prescription drugs or non-prescription drugs, you really need the help. You need us to get you through the process. You need to know the numbers and all the various defenses and ways we can make this case better. Unlike an alcohol case, we can just stop drinking alcohol. You can't stop taking your prescribed drugs. So you really need our help to make sure we get you through this process in the best possible way.